Hi, and welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. So today I am here with my April wrap-up. I actually managed to read 15 books in April, which I am super happy with, especially because it is the month I went back to work and the world started getting a little bit back to normal after our third lockdown in England, so I am very, very proud of that. I also did a few rereads that I wasn't expecting to do, which were really, really exciting, so I'm going to take you through one by one the books that I read in April, which, as I said, was 15 books. So to kick off the month we had the Easter Readathon, which was hosted by Kate from Reading Through Infinity. This ran over the 4 days of the Easter weekend, and there was 4 prompts to complete, which I managed to complete all 4 prompts, which I'm super, super happy with. And the first one that I completed was Peter Pan. I don't remember which prompts, which fit which books now. This one I think was for a book under 250 pages. Let's check. Yeah, I think this one was 235, so it just about fit that prompt. This was a real letdown for me. I only rated this one 2.5 stars. It was just so weird, like I just couldn't get on board with the story. I felt like I was going completely off what I knew from the Disney version that I haven't watched for years, but I really couldn't comprehend what was happening unless I pictured it in the Disney version. There was very few things I liked about this. I liked Wendy, I liked kind of the interactions between Wendy and some of the other children. I just found it really wacky. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. It was very much like Alice in Wonderland in the fact that I felt like I was in somebody's hallucinations and I couldn't make much sense of it in my own head, which was really, really weird. So this is about Wendy and her 2 brothers that I can't remember the names of, who are taken to Neverland by Peter, who is a boy who doesn't age and is also like a mythical fairy thing. So they're taken to Neverland on an adventure and they live there for God knows how long, and it's basically about their interactions with the other beings that live in Neverland and the kind of adventures that they have there. There's a lot of talk of family and of friendship, which I enjoyed, but I just found this one too strange for my liking, so that one only got 2.5 stars from me. The next one I read, however, was The Secret Garden, and I do remember this one was for the Spring Vibes prompt, and I actually loved this one so much more. This was my classic of the month as recommended by Alex, so I've been reading a classic every month from this lovely Wordsworth edition set that I have, and I've been getting them recommended to me by my friends. This is Alex's favourite book in the world. I will link her channel down below. So she wanted me to read The Secret Garden, so I picked this one up and I actually really, really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars. This is about a little girl who moves to the UK from India. I think she was originally from the UK, or her parents were. She has an uncle here and she moves back to live with her uncle because she is orphaned, I believe, and she discovers this secret garden in the kind of grounds of where she's living with her uncle. But this one actually explores a lot deeper, darker themes than I think a lot of people think this book is about. There is a lot of like redemption arcs, and there's a lot of discussions of kind of forgiveness and who we are and how we interact with people and politeness. There is a lot of kind of talk about who she is as a person and her overcoming like what she's learned about herself, and basically I really like how the garden helps her with that and helps her become a better person, and I believe that that's what this book is about. I have actually watched 2 adaptations of this since reading the book, which was a wild ride because they were very different and I don't think either of them depicted the book in how I would view it, but I did really, really enjoy this story and I'm very glad I read it, so this one was 4 stars from me. And the next one I read was The Falling in Love Montage by Kira Smith. I absolutely loved this book. I read this one as well as part of the Easter Readathon, and I read this for the prompt of a pastel cover, I believe, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it. This is a kind of Irish contemporary romance. It's a sapphic romance, and this follows Saoirse, who is gay, and she is basically trying to stay away from girls. The only time she will kind of interact with girls is for kind of a fling. She's not really looking for anything serious. She doesn't want to fall in love, and then she meets Ruby, I think her name is, who obviously is her like dream girl and she really loves, and it is kind of exploring their relationship, but it's also exploring a lot of deeper, darker themes that I didn't expect, such as Saoirse's parents' interactions and relationship, and they've broken up in the past kind of year or so because of her mum's dementia. So I just feel like dementia is just not really talked about at all in YA books. This is probably the first book that I've read that actually really explores it in detail, and I really liked the discussions that were in here. It made me actually really emotional, which I didn't expect, and I just really loved it. Saoirse was really funny, the writing is very witty, and I absolutely flew through it, which was exactly what I needed at the time. I would definitely recommend this one if you are looking for kind of a summer romance that has kind of deeper, darker emotional themes. And the next one I read I'm actually going to talk about is series as a whole, and that is the Ember in the Ashes Quartet by Sabaa Tahir. So this one I read the first one as part of the Easter readathon. Me and Alex actually buddy read this book over the 4 days of the readathon, and I think we read this for the prompt of New Beginnings as it was the first one in a series. I actually really enjoyed the first one in this book so much. So this follows a soldier who's a student at Blackcliff Academy in this world, and it also follows somebody who's part of kind of the rebel side of the world, who are against the kind of government or the leaders, because some stuff's happened in her family that has made her want to go against what they believe in. And because Leia, who is the kind of rebel, she is asked to go and spy on somebody who works in the Blackcliff Academy, and that is why Leia ends up in there as a slave, and that is where the interactions with Elias, who is the soldier that lives at Blackcliff Academy, kind of start. And I really enjoyed the first one in this series. I think I gave all of them between 3.5 and 4 stars. I would say overall this series was a 4, kind of low 4-star for me. I did really enjoy it, but I would definitely say that this one was my favourite one overall. It just kind of had an introduction to the series that I needed, and as it went on there was kind of a lot more that happened in the series that I struggled to follow. The characters had different points of view, and their names kept changing, and their situations kept changing, and as their situations changed they all had different side characters and completely different events that were happening within their own stories that I just found really difficult to follow in the end. But I did still really enjoy it, and this series did make me quite emotional. I did really enjoy the characters and the kind of found family aspect of it. This one was definitely my favourite of the series, and I think my least favourite was A Reaper at the Gates. So me and Alex did actually buddy read this whole series throughout the month, starting with An Ember in the Ashes as part of the Easter readathon. I do apologise if the light keeps changing. It just seems to be getting darker and darker outside because it's raining today and it's kind of stormy, which is really nice, so I keep having to adjust the lighting because yeah, it's really kind of getting dark now. But anyway, the next one I read was The Near Witch by V. Schwab. This was a weird one because I was actually reading 3 fantasies at once, which I would not recommend and I will not be doing again, but it just so worked out like that I wanted to read something on top of the buddy read that I was doing with Alex, so I picked up The Near Witch. And I'm really glad I picked this one up. This is a beautiful paperback, a new edition with the crows on the edges. And yeah, this is by V. Schwab, who is one of my favourite authors because I absolutely love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and that is one of my favourite books, if not my favourite book in the world. So I was hesitant going into this book because this is one of V. Schwab's earliest works, and I didn't really know how much her writing had developed, having loved her newest book. But actually this pleasantly surprised me. It was very dark and creepy. This is about somebody who lives in Nia, which is a village, and children start going missing, and then a stranger is blamed, and the main character kind of becomes friends with this stranger, and they're trying to kind of track down who is stealing the children. All the while the other people in the village are trying to track down the stranger because they think that is who's stealing the children. There is a lot of aspects to this that I loved. This is in the middle of a moor and the atmosphere was absolutely beautiful. I really enjoyed this, but it was kind of a slow burn for me. There is also a short 50-page story at the back that I didn't really enjoy that much, and I just didn't see the point of it being in there. But I gave this one 4 stars overall just because the atmosphere and the writing was impeccable. Me and my colleague at work were talking about V. Schwab because we both love her writing, and apparently she has said recently something about how she chooses every single word she writes, and I definitely believe that that is how V. Schwab writes, because you could really tell in this book. And yeah, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And the next one I read was Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard, and this one was kind of a mixed bag for me. I read this on audiobook, as I have with the whole of the Red Queen series from the start of the year. I've been reading one of these a month, and I finished this one in April. This is a chunky beast, and I'm very glad that I listened to the audiobook because I wasn't so daunted by it. But I have very mixed feelings about this series in general. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. It is just a little bit too focused on war and politics for me. Honestly, I'm not massively into like high political fantasy, and there was a lot of focus on kind of the intricacies of the royal family and the politics and things like that I just don't care that much about. I really enjoyed the characters, and there was a character in this book who I won't say who it is because she doesn't get a point of view until much later in the series, but I actually was pleasantly surprised by her story, and that was the story that I found myself really wanting to come back to instead of the main characters. I did sympathise with the main characters and I liked them a lot, and I did like everybody's stories, but there was one in particular that I kept coming back to. I won't tell you anything about this book because it is the last and 4th book in the series, but effectively this follows Mare Barrow, who is a red in a world of silvers, and the reds are basically kind of the lowlifes, they're the poor, they live in the Stilts, which is a very poor area, and they are kind of soldiers in the army, and the silvers are kind of the high class, they're the royal family, and Mare ends up getting involved with the silvers, and the silvers have a power, and very early they have magical powers. Each of them have a different kind of power, and very early on in the story Mare discovers that she has a power which actually makes her a silver, and then all hell breaks loose and her story ends up kind of starting from there. I really like the concept of this series, and I did like it overall. I just think that Red Queen was just a great introduction and was my favourite out of all of the books, so I gave this one 3.5 stars. So the next one I read was Autoboyography by Christina Lauren. I actually really was pleasantly surprised by this, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is an LGBT love story between two guys, Tanner and I cannot remember the other guy's name, Sebastian. I read this one a couple of weeks ago. I just pulled it out of my TBR jar, and it's been on my TBR for a while, and I really loved it. The weird thing was about this book is it has a heavy focus on Mormonism, which I didn't really expect and didn't know going into it. And also I just know nothing about Mormonism, so it was a real eye-opener for me, and the way that the religion was handled was mixed in my opinion. It was very negative towards Mormons, but that was kind of my only complaint. I just absolutely fell in love with Tanner and Sebastian's story. I found it really emotional, to the point where I was just reading it and crying by the last kind of 20 pages, because I just wanted things to work out for them. I really loved them so much more than I expected. And this basically follows Tanner as he is dared to join a class that means he has to write a book in 4 months, and Sebastian is one of the kind of helpers in that class as a past student and a author that was published because of the class. So he kind of comes back as a mentor, and because of that a kind of friendship sparks between them and maybe more. I really did enjoy this story, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the next one I read was With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was another surprise for me. Again, I pulled this one out of my TBR jar, and I'm so glad I did. This one was a 5-star read for me because honestly it blew my mind. It was really good, and I just couldn't put it down. I absolutely loved it. So this follows, can't remember her name, Amoni, who is a young girl with a daughter. So I think she's 17 and she has a 2-year-old daughter, and this basically explores her going back to school and trying to deal with balancing school and having her daughter and having her elderly grandma around who she lives with, and having a relationship not a relationship, but trying to establish what the relationship is with her daughter's father, who she's no longer with at the moment, and kind of having friendships and relationships, etc, etc. A normal teenage life, but with a 2-year-old daughter. I really didn't expect this one to be as amazing as it was, but I just absolutely fell in love with Amoni's kind of story. This one actually follows her as she joins a culinary arts class at her school. Cooking is her absolute passion, and there is something about cooking that I absolutely love when it is mentioned in stories, so there is no surprise that I absolutely love this one. So it kind of follows her and her passion for cooking, and her trying to find out how she can pursue that passion when she has a little girl, and whether that is right for her, the right path to go down, and how she can kind of put away the guilt of trying to have her own life when she also wants to put her little girl first and foremost in her life. This one was just so emotional as well. It had a lot of depth to it, and I just absolutely loved it. I've also read Clap When You Land by this same author, and I really want to read The Poet X, which will be my last book, I think, by her. And the next one I read, I actually also gave 5 stars, but I don't have my copy right now because I've given it to Courtney, because it's been on her want to buy list for a while, and that was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This was an absolutely beautifully written non-fiction memoir about being queer and being black and so many other things. It was just absolutely beautifully written. It was very, very honest. It was very raw. George really didn't shy away from their use of language throughout this, and there is a lovely author letter in the start of the book that really describes why they decided to go with the language that was used. Basically, this talks about a lot of things that George has gone through in their very short life at the moment. I think they're in their early 30s. So it basically spans their childhood, their teenage years, and the start of their adult life to present day. There's a lot of discussions of kind of abuse and exploring of sexuality and sexual abuse. So there's a lot of stuff that has happened in George's life which is discussed in this story with no barriers up, which I actually really liked. As I said in the author letter at the start of the book, George kind of talks about why they included these scenes and why they included even the most brutal of scenes, and that is because you just don't know who this is going to help. If George went through this as a teenager, who else might have gone through these things as a teenager, and who might need to read an honest recollection of these to realise that they are not alone? I feel like this is an incredibly important story, and although I am not queer and I'm not black, it really, really helped open my eyes to some of the experiences that young black queer people have. And I just think it's a really important read, and honestly I think it will save people's lives, I think it will change people's lives, and I think it will make people realise that they are not alone. I would highly recommend this one if you are looking for a non-fiction. And I would also like to thank Penguin for sending me that copy through work. Thank you very much to them for that completed copy. So a book I read in the last week of April, we are in the home stretch guys, and that is Not So Pure and Simple by Lama Giles. Thank you to Alex for gifting me this copy a while ago. I really enjoyed this book, but I felt it had a lot of issues. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars in the end because I just couldn't square away some of the things that happened in this book. This follows Dell, who has had a crush on a girl for all of his life since kindergarten, and they're now about 17, I believe, and he starts going to church with his mom, and he realises that this girl is also in the church, and then he ends up joining Purity Pledge to try and get closer to this girl. If that already doesn't sound messed up in a way, there's a lot more to it. But honestly, this one was just very up and down. I found that Dell had a lot of kind of thoughts of over-sexualising girls. There was a lot of problematic things. There was a lot of talk of porn and masturbation and just stuff that didn't quite sit right with me. I think part of this is because I hope this is written with a teenage boy in mind, and I also think that this is a really, really good book for that audience. There is definitely not enough fiction out there and contemporaries out there for teenage guys, and I think this is one that could really appeal, and I hope some people do pick it up. It just didn't quite sit right with me because there was a lot of talk of sexualising of women, which did make me uncomfortable and kind of seeing them not as objects, but it was kind of close enough to that to not sit right. There was also kind of the trope of he did have a redemption arc, but it was very much too little too late, and it was only because things had happened to the people closest to him. There was no kind of realization earlier than that. And it just didn't really make up for the rest of the story for me. However, I did find this one really compelling. I just think maybe I'm not quite the right audience for it, and it definitely does have some problems. I have very mixed feelings, as you can probably tell, so I rated this one 3.5 stars. And the last two books that I read in the month I'm going to talk about together, and that is Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm. I don't have too much to say about these because I actually read them last year for the first time, but with the show coming out, and I actually am watching the show at the moment, I have 2 episodes left and I'm absolutely loving it so much. I have found myself wanting to reread these books. I actually read the Grisha books completely in the wrong order. I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom first, then I read King of Scars, then I read these books, and here we are. So I thought actually I've wanted to reread a lot of the Grisha books for a while. It's been probably 5 or 6 years since I first read Six of Crows, and I've not reread it since. I'd already decided to reread King of Scars before reading Rule of Wolves, so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to read all of the Grisha books in order, which is what I've wanted to do for a long time, starting with Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, Ruin and Rising, and then me and Alex are going to buddy read Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. So anyway, I really enjoyed these books. I can definitely see why people don't like them. Lee's writing has definitely developed a lot, and I'm finding that I have more of a connection to the characters because I'm watching the show. So this basically follows Alina, who is a Grisha and doesn't know she's a Grisha at the very start of this story. But basically the Grisha in this world are the ones that have kind of magical powers. They are very powerful, they're kind of looked up to. And very early on in the story, Alina finds out under very weird circumstances that she is a Grisha, and she has the power maybe to destroy the Fold. The Fold is this thing in their world that separates part of the continent from another part, and it is this very, very dangerous, cloudy, shadowy place. It's very hard to describe visually, that have these animals in it called Volcra who attack you, and they're very dangerous. And she realises, because she's put in that situation, that she can kind of help maybe destroy this dark place. So she is sent to kind of the palace to be with the royal family and the Darkling, who is a very, very powerful being in this book, who is also a Grisha and is basically the opposite of Alina, and he creates darkness rather than Alina creating light. And there is a lot of discussions of their kind of relationship. I really enjoyed reading this series again. I have just finished Ruin and Rising, which will be in my May wrap up. But yeah, I did enjoy these. I gave them 4 stars. I haven't changed my review from last year because, as I said, it's not been too long since I read them. Definitely think that Lee's writing has improved, but I did still really enjoy these books. So that is the end of my very long 15-book April wrap-up. Thank you for sticking with me while I explained all of these books to you. I'm very proud of how I did this month, and it's very surprising to me, to be honest, that I managed to read this amount, but I'm very glad. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about the books I read in April. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment down below with what you read in April, and if you have also read any of the books that I read this month, and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye!